Glad to see everyone hanging around for this last session for the Fabric workshop. So we call it the hot topics. Really what the motivation for the session is, Fabric really is our mission to become a testbed of testbeds. We're really focusing on building community. So we want to bring in the important activities in the community, and then at this convening opportunity, we're going to, over time, bring in different topics. So today we invited 3 speakers. Each of them is leading a major project around a different topic. So Paul from Wisconsin will be talking about internet measurement efforts with Fabric. Phuong Cao from Illinois will be talking about, I believe, the CalDIT project, which is a continuous audit project for SSH attacks. And then Jay from Rochester will be talking about assert, I believe, and then the activities that expanded from there. So yeah, without further ado, so let me invite Paul.
Thanks, KC. It's a pleasure to be able to present today. My thanks to the organizers and for all of the hard work that they've put in. I'm going to share my screen now and we'll kick things off. Okay, and my slides are available on the site, so please feel free to reference those offline and send me email if you have any questions. So my talk for today is Infrastructure for Internet Measurement Research in Fabric. This is a project that is supported through an EAGER grant. And as I'm sure you've heard, Fabric is a testbed that is aligned with and motivated by science drivers. So what I proposed in this EAGER is the idea of internet measurement as a science driver for Fabric. And immediately it might seem a little bit of a paradox. How can a self-contained infrastructure, distributed as it is, be something that could potentially support research that's focused on the internet writ large? And that is exactly the paradox that we are attempting to address in our work. So our motivation is to be able to adapt Fabric so that it can indeed address the challenges of scale and complexity and dynamics that are the focus of much of the research in the network measurement and analysis community. And our hope is that by building infrastructure, we can attract researchers to the infrastructure, to Fabric, to conduct their research. One of the things that I want to make clear is that the work that we're doing is not about measuring Fabric itself. That is the work that's being done by Jim Griffion from University of Kentucky, which I'm sure you've heard about so far. However, we're working in coordination with Jim on our efforts. So our vision and our hope is that if we're successful in developing this kind of infrastructure, we will indeed create capability that enable Fabric to be actively used by the internet measurement community. And when I say the internet measurement community, think about conferences like the Internet Measurement Conference. And if we're really, really successful, what we'll have facilitated is enabling brand new research findings that would not have been possible without this capability that we've built in Fabric. So how do we achieve this vision? Well, what we're going to try to do is to deploy some relatively well-known tools and capabilities in the infrastructure, which I consider low-risk activities. And we're also going to try to develop and deploy capabilities that catalyze brand new research, meaning data that no one has looked at before, toward the goal of doing something special and making Fabric special for internet measurement research. And along the way, what we're going to do once we've achieved some deployment of infrastructure is take steps to raise awareness in the measurement community and to build a community around what we're trying to achieve. So we have 3 different activities that are underway. And the first is something that is very standard and normal, which is to deploy active probing capability in the fabric infrastructure. And for those of you who are familiar with, who have done internet measurement, you know that this is the sort of the basis for hundreds, if not thousands, of papers that have been written over the years. And our approach is going to be very straightforward, which is to deploy ripe atlas nodes, or probes as they're referred to, throughout the fabric infrastructure. For those of you who don't know, ripe atlas is a widely used platform that has been built over a long period of time by our friends at Ripe in Europe. And the interesting thing is that the infrastructure from Ripe that is actually active in Fabric right now is relatively small. There are 21-ish Fabric locations. Of those Fabric locations, Ripe probes are deployed in 11 different locations, and only 5 are actually active. So we've got a little work to do, and beyond simply deploying probes, what we're really interested in doing is making sure that this infrastructure within Fabric is easy to use and accessible, which is not always the way that things go with Ripe Atlas. Our second objective is to deploy a network telescope or Honeynet capability within the Fabric infrastructure. And I noticed in some of the other talks that this is something that is familiar to at least some. And the observation is that telescopes and Honeynets and darknets are standard for gathering data on unwanted and malicious activity. And there are well-known deployments of darknets and telescopes and Honeynets over the years. Probably the most familiar are the deployments at CATA, which have gotten, and rightly so, a lot of attention over the years. And our approach is to build a Honeynet on Fabric nodes. Okay, so a distributed system for collecting unwanted traffic. Using open source software. We don't want to reinvent anything. Rather, what we want to do is to utilize unused address space in the various Fabric node locations and deploy a standard configuration so that we can collect data and decide whether or not we want that data to remain local or to backhaul it to some centralized infrastructure. And we've spent a lot of time on this over the past year to develop a deployment. And I'm happy to say that we have something operational on a /22 on our campus. One of the things that we do have to pay attention to is, if we're going to do this more broadly, how we interact with the various campus security entities and networking entities so that we can get the proper approvals. And what we've actually deployed on our campus is an infrastructure, a software infrastructure that's been developed at various locations, but we're interacting directly with the folks at Merit and my old friend McAllis there on a system called Honeytrap, which is what's referred to as a low interaction honeypot. At least that's the way that we have it configured, meaning that all that we do in this is collect traffic that hits our interfaces, and we respond to TCP SYNs. So we have an operational infrastructure in place. We're building a distribution that we can deploy in other locations. And I just have a few slides that I want to show, or a few graphs that I want to show. What's great about Honeynets is that the minute that you set them up, you start getting great data from them, even if you're only monitoring a single address. So we're monitoring 1,000, but even a single address that you can deploy packet capture or even low interaction capability on, you see all of this crazy stuff, which is why it's fun. So on our Honeypot, using Honeytrap, we're collecting about 10 gigabytes of data per day. We see these crazy variations in terms of inbound TCP connects, inbound UDP connects, total packets, which, you see these crazy spikes that often indicate things like backscatter from DDoS attacks, and just the amazing source diversity, meaning the unique IP addresses that we're seeing this traffic on is kind of amazing. So we're excited about the progress that we've made, and we're looking forward to further deployments. I wish I didn't have to go so fast in this talk, But moving on to our third capability, it's really passive measurement focused and focused specifically on layer one. So physical infrastructure, and in particular, the transport infrastructure that's deployed on the underlying fiber plant, which, as you know by now, is operated by ESNET. And I see layer one research as really a greenfield opportunity for the network measurement community. There have been very few papers that have been published on anything going on in layer one. So this is kind of high risk in the sense that we need to attract the community to these possibilities and put together compelling data sets. But the real benefit that we have is with ESNET as a partner, and the experts that are operating the infrastructure at ESNET, we've gone through a process over the past months to identify metrics that we think will be interesting, and to set up a basic data capture and publishing capability, which we expect to be available in the first quarter of 2022. So I want to emphasize that the folks at ESNET really are amazingly capable. Ed Ballas and Dale Carter are experts in this, and they've put together what I think of as a compelling capability to collect data within ESNET. This slide just illustrates some snapshots that they sent along of what they have the ability to do. And I'm really excited about publishing the data that they make available to us, and then championing it in the internet measurement community toward the goal of being able to address research questions at layer one, which not very many people have done. So this is my last slide. I'm sorry for going 100 miles an hour, but we continue to make progress. And in particular, over the next couple of months, we're going to focus on broader deployment of both passive, meaning our Honeynet, and active, meaning ripe nodes in other locations. So we focused on Wisconsin first, so we have something we can deploy, and then we're going to deploy packages at hopefully 3 other locations over the coming months. We'll finalize what we're doing with ESNET and announce data availability through the various mechanisms in Fabric. And then what I plan to do in 2022 is to assemble an advisory group to support and promote what we're doing on internet measurement in Fabric. So that concludes my talk. Thank you very much for your attention. To the extent that we have time, I'll be happy to answer questions in the time that we have.
All right. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat or the Q&A for AirMeet. This time, we'll invite the second speaker, Phuong Cao from University of Illinois. All right. Okay, so there's a question, I guess this is for Paul. How much interest is there in IPv4 versus IPv6 Honeynet? Is that?
Yeah, so great question. I don't know if I'm the right person to speak for the community in that regard, but I personally am very interested. Since obviously there are differences both in terms of interest from attackers, threat vectors, and so forth, and obviously big differences in the amount of address space that can potentially be both monitored and how the bad guys operate in that space. So yeah. For me personally, high interest.
I'll guess Phuong will also be able to comment on this as he talk about his work.
So should I start?
Yes, yeah. Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, the organizer, for the opportunity. I think this is a very relevant session, and the topic that Paul mentioned is also relevant to what I'm doing. So I'm Phuong Cao. I am a research specialist at the National Center for Supercomputing Application. Today we'll talk about the topic of Honeypot in cyber infrastructure testbed. First, let me give you a brief overview of Honeypot and why do we care about this topic now. Honeypot has been around since the 90s, and actually the first Honeypot has been proposed at the Bell Lab when an intruder iteratively cracked the password file in one compromised machine. And the researcher decided to build a chain root jail to monitor the command executed by the attacker. And since then, the concept of honeypot has been very popular with the popular of the internet and the connectivity of device. All the major network protocol we have seen there has been honeypot built for that. For example, at NCSA, we have a particular SSH honeypot that we deploy on a /16 network that has been recorded more than 10 billions of the attack attempt, which is the most that has been published to date. In addition, we also have the honeypot built for the real system, for example, a smart factory honeypot or an entire power grid honeypot, which are really realistic. And together, there's also the emergence of Honeynet and the concept of intelligence sharing among the honeypot and existing network monitor. And I know that projects like SDAIA and Fabric, funded by NSF, are doing this to some extent, like Paul mentioned. Now, what I really want to talk about today is that going forward, what would look like in the third generation honeypot, like I call. So, with the increasingly sophisticated of the attacker leveraging machine learning and AI technique, the honeypot also need to have such a capability to become smarter and attract such attacker. So in the third generation honeypot, I would call the data-driven smart honeypot, in which we leverage machine learning technique, augment that with the domain knowledge to automatically generate personal identifiable information. All of them are fake, but that is indistinguishable from the real data given to an outsider to look at such a data. And such a honeypot need to be deployable at the edge of the network and serving as a first line of defense. And these honeypot need to be high interactive but immutable so that it would leave the host network intact in case a real attack happen. So all of this is to deal with a an emergent threat, which is a ransomware. And this concept we call a ransomware honeypot. So why do we care this about ransomware? Ransomware is really the new endemic. So a ransomware is essentially a malware that encrypts, exfiltrates, and holds the data or the entire network for a ransom. Um, More than 300 millions and increasing encounter of ransomware has been seen in this year alone, mainly because the ease of access to data as people are moving to the cloud and working remotely, the ease of demanding anonymous payment, and the ease of being paid through affiliate network or selling the ransomware kit, ranging from more than 175 to $80,000. And the current technical defenses against ransomware cannot cover all the attack surfaces. So in terms of preventing the compromise, we have federated authentication, we have Bayesian host, and we have the signature for a certain class of the ransomware. In terms of preventing internal movement, we have the problem of reusing credential in the host authentication or reusing the access token in the network request. To prevent the data extraction from the system, we have solution to look for signature PII in the egress traffic and anomaly detection. However, there's still no effective vaccine against this kind of endemic. Even even there's a protection in place, the reinfection of ransomware is still very likely. So what we propose here is an alternative approach to the problem by building a ransomware honeypot that is driven by machine learning generated data. So there are three main components of our honeypot. The first component is that we have realistic data that we hosted on a set of semi-open database. So semi-open here meaning that the database is open to a certain class of attacker so that we can observe their behavior when they interact with the honeypot. And all of them could be able to deploy on the hybrid cloud infrastructure. So both the internal cloud and the public cloud would be able to deploy this honeypot. So in terms of data, this is a core technique of this honeypot that make it unique in that we augment the data that we collected from the public data set. For example, there's already public data of PII data that has been leaked, or the data of public source code or host name of certain network. And then we augment that public knowledge in terms of the distribution of data, the format of the data. We augment that with a seed of internal data that is provided to us by the networks that want to run the honeypot. And combine these two kinds of data, we can use that to fuse into a probabilistic model to generate the data that are indistinguishable from the real data from a attacker point of view. And to do this, we can conduct the test using the real security expert to see whether they can distinguish between the synthetic data or the real data or not. So this is similar to the Turing test. Now the second component here is a set of semi-open database that we embedded in the production network. So I want to emphasize that these databases are not the leaked database. They are the purposely created database that host the data that we generated. So these are not indexable by the search engine. Instead, they contain a unique access key to the database that we would accidentally expose to the public through the source code repository or through different kind of channel. And this kind of infrastructure is similar to the zero trust concept, in which it allows us to give the attacker a unique access key and then trace their tactics through the key. So even if they change the IP address when they come into the system, we can still trace them through the presence of the key. And finally, the honeypot here would be deployed, distribute as a set of immutable images of the database that we pre-configure. And people who are interested can grab those images and deploy that to their system together with the honeypot and the existing host and network monitoring tool. And these honeypot would be short-lived, meaning we would only let them live for a few minutes at a time to attract the attack and then destruct them to minimize the damage to the network. So I think this is very relevant to Fabric because, in my opinion, the kind of ransomware attack on scientific network are imminent. And Fabric programmable research infrastructure is ideal for this project because it can provide the honeypot as a service so that any research project want to turn on the honeypot capability to learn about the attacker can do that easily. And it is also easy to scale the honeypot to multiple geophysical locations and automatically destruct the honeypot as needed. So in summary, I have presented a ransomware honeypot that can serve as a first line of monitoring against the future attack attempt. This allows us to study the attacker penetration and data stealing behavior. And more importantly, it allows us to collect the cryptocurrency addresses of ransom demand, which allow us to collaborate with the law enforcement and also use that for preemptive monitoring of the attack. All of this would be providing the intelligence and providing a unique training opportunity for internal staff and user so that when a real ransomware attack happens, they would know how to respond. Yes, thank you. And if you have any question, I would be happy to answer through chat, or you can email me at my address below.
Well, thank you very much, Phuong.
Thank you.
Yep, feel free to post questions while Jay bring up his talk.
I need, yeah. You see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's very great to, should I start or should I wait for other questions for?
Yeah, so quick question, I guess, with Phuong, your ransomware monitoring system, is it deployed?
Yes, so it has been deployed on a public cloud provider, and we are on the process of deploying that at the University of Illinois.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
So probably we'll keep this this question to after Jay's talk. Jay, you want to proceed?
Thank you. I'll keep it short. So thank you for inviting me, Casey, and also I think this is a very good topic following Paul and Phuong's talk. So my work has been really using artificial intelligence, machine learning to process those malicious the data that reflecting malicious activities. I think that the idea here is to demonstrate that maybe some of my work can be really benefit Fabric, the users of Fabric. So I've been working a lot with continuous semi-supervised learning to really treat unknown, unlabeled data. I'm Jay. I'm the professor in computer engineering in Rochester Institute of Technology. So I need to use that arrow. So what I've been dealing with is treating a lot of this intrusion detection alerts or other event logs. They're really hopefully reflecting malicious activities. Sometimes there's a lot of false positives. But really the common problem there is that there's a lot of data, like too much data, too much alert, too much event logs, too much noise. And most of this information is very cryptic, right? So we talk about packet captures, we talk about flows, connection logs, host logs. A lot of times that this automatic collected logs are really cryptic, very difficult to understand what do the attacker want, right? What is the intent of this action leading to the next action? And then also there's a lot of changing behaviors in the attack surfaces, making it difficult to say we're going to have labeled data. There's a lot of data sets out there today for my type of research work, but really that assuming we have tons of labeled data, in this kind of research, I personally think that it is not a reasonable assumption. Now, in terms of regarding Fabric, we assume that there are loggings available for the experimental protocol, services, things like that aspect. Assuming we have those loggings, some kind of event logs available, which I'm very glad to hear from and for collecting a lot of traffic. The traffic can be translated to, let's say, for example, conduct log in Greek, can be translated to Suricata alerts. Very not obviously, but yes, they can be translated to that fairly easy. So with that, we still have potentially very large amount of event logs, likely cryptic information. So for example, you may see a log entry. What does that mean to my experiment protocols, right? What does that really mean to me? So you can see how our research can help you to understand the type of unknown behaviors, the type of unknown anomalies or tags that could happen with no labels, right? With nothing there to say hey, I'm expecting this kind of anomalous on my experimental protocols, or this kind of attack going to happen on me. You don't know that. I wouldn't assume that you know that as a user. Can we help you to summarize that? That's the challenge. So we've been working on several prototypes, including Casey mentioned about assert. The common thing on these different research prototypes is their continual, almost near real-time, semi or unsupervised learning. Sometimes you can call it, this is a new term called self-learning, self-supervised learning for cybersecurity data. So assert is a system we've been developing for several years, and we've test deployed with a real-world SOC operation. We got some really good results. I'll show you some in a minute. Patrol and he are relatively new. One of my PhD students, he just defended yesterday, finishing with both of these prototype systems where they can translate. The Patrol is to translate cryptic information, cybersecurity information into attack intent stages with only 1% label data. And heat is to automate extraction of cyber attack campaigns, leading to an indicator of compromise. Clear Row is another PhD student. He's also finishing up pretty soon. That is a near real-time aggregation of temporarily drifting attack episodes. In machine learning, the notion of drifting, that the episodes maybe have a different kind of characteristic that's drifting. And his algorithm can extract that in near real-time kind of manner, and also extraction of co-occurring critical events. I'm going to show you some sample results based on real-world data. The first one is Patrol. Patrol is to translate cryptic cybersecurity attacks into some attack intent stages. If you look at the bottom on the left, there are two examples here. Typical people looking at this, expert may be able to interpret them quickly, but not everyone can interpret them. And these are examples of Suricata alerts. Suricata is a type of intrusion detection systems. There are almost 70,000, I think more than 70,000 now, signatures, unique signatures. And these signatures, typical people see maybe 20, 50, 100, maybe 200 at most on a regular basis, practitioners. But to say that someone can understand all 70,000 of them is very unrealistic. So the one on the left, after you do some search, you say, oh, this particular alert really meant that someone trying to escalate a privilege on the end system, on the targeted system. And the one on the right is just the discovery of the host, right? So a lot of this, sometimes easy, sometimes difficult. So how can we translate that? We developed something called pseudo-active learning to really get to very interesting, good performance, in our opinion, about 85% accuracy with only 1% label data. We use something called Monte Carlo dropout certainty to really ensure the confidence on what this result means. That's Patrol. And we also have assert. Assert is a system that uses unsupervised continual learning to extract different kind of ongoing attack behaviors on one's network. So here are 5 examples. All of these, each one of these is a unique attack behavior, but all 5 of them is a command and control type of attacks over time. This across August 17 to August 20 on a real world operation center, SOC operation. So the one that's orange, for example, is command and control going through the MS SQL service. And then the blue one going up and down, that's command and control going through a domain controller. So when someone experiments their protocols, we may be helping to extract, comparing, contrasting to the known attack behaviors. And the last but not least, I want to show you is also using a real world SOC that my student Steve, he actually using his method called HEAT, H-E-A-T, to extract attack campaigns. This is an example. On the most leftmost plot is we include all the alerts, creating all the episodes. You'll see a lot of different kind of confusing activities going on your network, going back like 24 hours. But after his method, he will be sorting out to say, hey, the first step the person did in this campaign is to create a privilege escalation on a victim, and then try to work on going through a particular external autonomous system number, ASN, and then going through the same victim and looking at the same port, eventually leading to some kind of remote code execution at the target machine. I'm going to skip the picture on the right. That is part of our performance. And with this, I just want to share with you that these research prototypes that I believe that it is strong opportunities, benefits to the users, right? The researchers using using Fabric as testbed really help you to really look at what kind of anomalous behaviors or cyber attack behavior that might happen, especially given what Paul is collecting, Phuong is collecting. We'd love to talk to you more, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments and ideas to collaborate. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. So now I think we're open up for question to any of our speakers. I see that Phuong just responded to Ilya's last question. Yep, and the answer is here. So I'll just repeat that, how important it is to have different diverse IP addresses representing Honeynets and versus all address coming from one AS. So Phuong, actually, do you want to elaborate?
Yes. So let me quickly answer that. I think in the past we found that IP address should resolve to the network that we are running the honeypot. For example, if we are running a honeypot for a hospital, then the attacker should find that that IP belongs to the range of that hospital for them to believe that this is a real thing. But as people are moving to the cloud, we find that many of the document and data store are being stored on the databases on the cloud. For example, AWS Dynamo or Google Data Store. So the importance of the IP address, we find that they are becoming less and less important as long as an attacker can find a data set that they think are realistic and that belong to a certain organization. They would believe that it is true. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm a teacher, right? I need to ask the student now.
All right, so Jay, asked this question. To the users of Fabric, what interest do you have to understand unknown behaviors of your protocol or internet activities targeting your protocol? I'm not sure how the audience can interact. Is there a raise hand here, or they just need to type? Amanda.
Folks can either type in the chat box or they can use the raise hand feature and we can pull them on stage if that is preferable. But if you're shy, I recommend just using the chat box.
I do have a question for Paul and Phuong, if you don't mind. I'm not an expert on any of the Honeynet, any of those collection methods. In Duke University, the STINA project, you're probably aware of that, the STINA project, like a federated Honeynet community. So what is the difference between that kind of activities versus that what you are describing? Would you be able to help me understand that?
I can answer quickly. I actually don't know the details of the Honeynet deployment that you mentioned. However, in general, most of the differences between Honeypot or Honeynet deployments have to do with the particular kind of data that winds up being collected in the system. So if it, for example, is simply a network telescope, like the large CADA deployment over the years, all that is a passive monitor on the address space that then enriches what's seen in on those IP addresses with additional information, right? So information related to the source addresses and so forth. Then you have simple low interaction honeypots like Honeytrap, which I described, which simply respond to TCP SYNs, and that's all. And again, the information that comes into that is enriched with additional information, for example, from DNS and from regarding network prefixes and so forth. And then you get to the level of sophistication of Phuong's Honeynet, which is highly interactive and very specific to different kinds of potential attacks, where you're interested then in the deep details of how the remote host is actually interacting with the local measurement device. So it's this spectrum of activity that define what you can actually do with the data. And I think that Phuong's example is sort of on one extreme of the spectrum, whereas the Kata Stardust system is on the other, and we're sort of in between.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the speakers? All right. So in that case, I think we're at the end of this session. Ilya, feel free to join in. I think this will naturally lead to some closing remarks.
Yep, I'm here. I think we're asking Deep to say a few words. He's in the audience. He's going to get pulled up to the stage in a moment.
Okay, Deep has been invited on stage. We are just waiting for him to accept the invitation.
Thank you.
But he might be trying to figure out how to do that.
And Amanda, feel free to remove the question.
And we have Deep on stage.
Hi guys. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I don't know if you want me to go now or Ilya, you're going to go first.
No, go ahead.
I first wanted to thank you, the organizers, for putting the NET workshop together. It was very neat, and so to see how many things that's going on, and the participation. I saw at the height of it about 100 people participating in the workshop. That's fantastic. I found the sessions very engaging. The researcher who are planning to do experimentation or already did some of the early experimentation. A lot of interesting ideas being actually exploring. And so this is very good. I like the education session as well this morning to some of the things. And one of the things I guess we have to make sure that those who have been using Genie for educational purpose, they have an easy transition phase to be able to use Fabric for the purpose of, making it available for students to be able to use it. So that's a bit of a challenge, but I think it's doable. And I'm obviously pleased with where it is with testbed right now, despite the challenges due to supply chain and pandemic. And so we're in very good shape. And from NSF perspective, I'm very, very happy to see activities. And I believe this is planned as every 6 months activities. And so by next 6 months, we'll see a lot more stuff. And I'd like to again thank all the organizers, Casey, Brittany, Ilya, for putting it together and making it work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deep. So we're up to closing remarks. I just have, I think, one slide. Let's see. So first of all, I also want to thank our leadership team, the organizers, Anita, Casey, Paul, Brittany, for organizing this. Thank you, Amanda, for helping run this so flawlessly. It's a lot of work in the background to keep these virtual workshops running. Thank you, NSF, for continuing to support us. And thank you all for coming and spending a couple of days with us. I know we need another virtual Zoom or otherwise session, like we need our teeth pulled, but this is important. This is important for us. It's important for the community. So we thank you all for doing this with us. I guess it's just a couple of things. Yeah, there's a lot of great ideas and interactions that we saw. This was really, really useful to us. Hopefully it was useful to you as well. We love feedback. We love honest feedback. So while occasionally it's nice for us to hear, hey, you guys are doing a good job, we also really like to hear, hey, this feature, this other test bed has, you really guys should look at this and think about this, or, you know, this doesn't work very well. Tell us, be honest. This is important. We want to hear, we want to make this better, we want to make this work for you, right? We want this to be a community effort. And I guess the last thing is, speakers, please send us your slides because we have many requests for them from other attendees who maybe missed a session. We have requests from NSF to see those slides. So if you don't mind, please send them to us, and then we'll make sure that they made available. And I think with that, that's it. Thank you very much. This has been a great workshop.